Hey y'all, Coach Hager. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you're enjoying your time off, and I hope everything's okay with you and your family. Uh, as you know, I told you about that we would have to get some work done, and so I figured instead of just putting the PowerPoints up there and letting you guys try to go through them, I would make videos and attach them as well too. You can have the PowerPoint up with it and just play this and then open up a new tab and just move, or you can just focus in on this. I understand that at times my PowerPoints you may not understand what I'm trying to talk about, so I figured this would be one good way to reach you guys and just let you sit here and listen to the video and get the information as we are going across. As you remember, we just finished out our Unit 3 test, and we're moving into Unit 4. Unit 4 is dubbed kind of like the Age of Jackson. Quite really, honestly, it goes all the way from about 1820 all the way until the start of the war. It's otherwise known as the antebellum period. If you remember in class, I told you guys that antebellum just means the period before war. And so there's a lot in this unit. It's a jam-packed unit, and we're going to kind of pull out the key points and just move through these key points. The first starting point is going to be the age of Jackson, and it's really breaks down into two parts: Jacksonian democracy and Jacksonian controversies. In this Jacksonian democracy, why give him the name? Why does it have to be Jacksonian democracy? Well, really, quite honestly, during this time period, we see the birth of what you guys know today as the modern political system, the system that you hear about, that you're about to go vote in. It is really born during this time. The origins of it, not fully complete, but the origins of it. And then, of course, Jacksonian controversies that takes place once he is president and the actions that he does. But today we're going to primarily focus on this one right here, Jacksonian democracies. And then tomorrow you guys will take a look at those Jacksonian controversies itself. Now, inside Jacksonian democracy, you remember 1820, that Missouri Compromise. That's the big thing I need you guys to get really from the year 1820. The Missouri Compromise. Maine becomes a free state. Missouri becomes a slave state. And the 3630 parallel, all right, right here. Everything to the south of it is slavery. Everything to the north of it is free. Now, what is also interesting about this election and this political map right here is how people voted back in this time prior to 1820. So 1816, 1812, these elections, how they were held. Notice this map, it looks really clean. Now, historians, we dub that as the era of good feelings, nationalism. The country was all behind one political party, and that there wasn't any other political parties that were really at the forefront of the nation's minds. Just keep it simple and sweet. But there's an interesting note that took place throughout the duration of the time from 1790, when we established our new constitution, all the way leading up to 1820, and that was how we balloted for president. Prior to 1820, right, this is how it went. Voters would go, and the voters would go vote, and then for president, and that would go to the state legislature. From there, the state legislature would decide if the voters did the correct job in voting, meaning they voted for who they wanted, the state legislators wanted to be president. Then the state legislators would turn the state vote in to the presidential electors, who would then elect the president. This is the old system of voting, and it was indirect, and it was controlled by the aristocracy. Which, you see, what you guys got to see is that the rich and the elite, they really didn't think that the poor or the common man could really make a choice in voting for the president. Primarily, one, because the rich felt that the poor were uneducated, that they just didn't get it. They didn't understand the political system. And that if you gave too much power to the common man or to the poor person, that tyranny would erupt, that they would just lead to mob violence, that things would be out of control. So, therefore, 1790 to about 1820, uh, the aristocracy chose who would be president. And so, one thing that was very interesting, if I could pull other slides up, I would, but to keep it simple for you guys, is that in the old system, voters would vote, and these were primarily land holding white males. The common man who did not have land, who was just, say, an iron or a blacksmith, they didn't get an opportunity to vote. Probably one, they didn't know to vote and they weren't educated enough to vote, and campaigning really didn't take place at this point in time. So basically, the voters were just rich white plantation owners of the elite who the state legislature primarily went in hand with, and to the president, to the electors to become the president. And so this was the old system. But after the election of 1820, moving into the election of 1824, we see a new system start to take place. And what brings about this new system? Well, primarily, guys, this is because new states are coming into the Union out west. Henry Clay's Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, soon to be here soon, Wisconsin and Michigan, and Iowa. These states are coming in, and rich landowners did not move out there. Okay, they primarily stayed in the East, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, and so we're getting a whole swath of brand new landowners who are coming into it, but they're not elite, they're not rich, they're not college educated, and so. Do they have just as much right to vote as, say, a landowner in the East? Well, of course they do. They own land. But not only that, they're common men, and so they want to incorporate. And as their state constitutions are coming through, all they say on them is, "Hey, if you are white, you get to vote." And that's just kind of how that one's going to roll. And so what we start to see out west is anyone who's white and is a male, you can vote. And so that breaks the trends of the old aristocracy and of the elite of the East is, hey, there are more people voting. And so now in this new system, in this direct election, what we simply know as democracy today, that state legislature gets taken out of it. All right. And now the voting will take place, and the voters, whoever wins the majority of it, will get the electors, which then will go to vote for the president. And so basically, we give Jackson the credit for this, or what we dub the Jacksonian Democracy, but really it's placed before him. But he has a hand to play in it. Now, one thing to say is by 1836, voters in all states except for South Carolina were casting direct ballots for president. In South Carolina, would continue their aristocracy or the old system of voting until 1860, and when they seceded from the Union. Well, 61 they seceded from the Union, but Lincoln is elected in 60, and so therefore they go ahead and drop out. But they did not allow common men to vote. Again, common man that would vote could possibly ruin their peculiar system of slavery. And to show you this new way of voting, this is the 1824 electoral map. I mean, it looks like a hodgepodge, big old mess right there. You have four candidates. Four candidates pull all these votes. It doesn't look clean. Like if we go back to the election of 1820, look how smooth and simple that looks. Two candidates, boom. All right. James Monroe takes it over John Quincy. But in the election of 1824 for president, it looks like a big old hodgepodge. And the big thing about this is, guys, is right here, that electoral vote. No one takes the required majority to win the presidency. And it's a tightly contested race, but still no one gets the majority. But the two leaders in this are Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams. Now, Andrew Jackson, of course, the hero of the Battle of New Orleans, you know, that awesome song that y'all loved in 1814. We took a little trip. I ain't going to sing it. Don't worry. But Andrew Jackson decides to run for president, and he carries most of the votes in states that you would think he would. John Quincy, up here from Massachusetts, the son of second President John Adams, one of those elite aristocracy people who a lot of the Westerners out here in the West and the Southerners distrusted, primarily because they didn't really know anything about it and they didn't really care to know anything about it. And so, therefore, you have John Quincy. Then you have William Crawford and Henry Clay. Now, we talked about Clay with the Compromise of 1820 and being the war hawk, but he carries, really quite honestly, what we call this Western belt right here, Missouri, Kentucky, and Ohio. He does have some sway in Indiana and Illinois. But primarily, though, because of him taking these, all right, that takes away from Jackson. You see, Jackson wins in Illinois and he wins in Indiana. But he does not get the majority needed to win the presidency. And so, of course, if you remember from civics, when there is a tie, it will go to the House of Reps to determine. And each state will cast one vote. And then from there, it's just a winner take all system in the one vote. Boom, 1825. Now, notice something. All right. Notice this. Jackson carries most of his states that he kept. Right. However, this one, Illinois, Missouri, Kentucky, and Ohio all swing in favor of John Quincy. All right, one, two, three, four. That puts him right there at nine. And, if he doesn't take Maryland or Louisiana, we might see Andrew Jackson take the election of 1825. But these states in particular, these four plus Louisiana, what makes these states switch? What makes these states flip? Well, the primary reason is there's no Henry Clay no longer on the ballot here in 1825. That's right. Henry Clay goes ahead and withdraws his name out of the presidential election. And in return, he makes a deal with John Quincy Adams. Right? He says to John Quincy, listen, I will turn the states that voted for me, plus, which would be Ohio, Kentucky, Missouri. Plus, I can guarantee you that I can switch Illinois and Louisiana in your favor. But I got one condition. All right. And this condition and this deal becomes known as the corrupt bargain. The Northwestern states that had supported Clay all through their support behind John Quincy Adams. And so, therefore, John Quincy Adams becomes the POTUS and Henry Clay becomes the Secretary of State. There's the deal, guys. In the corrupt bargain, or this bargain that was made, Henry Clay knew that he could sway Congress because he was a member of Congress, and he's very prominent there as well too. I mean, he wrote the Missouri Compromise of 1820, so therefore he realized that he could not win the presidency, but he would take the next best thing, which is becoming the Secretary of State. John Quincy Adams would become the POTUS, right, and would make Henry Clay the Secretary of State. And they dubbed this the corrupt bargain. Now, why did Henry Clay decide to do this? Why would he give up, right, his seat in Congress to become the Secretary of State? Well, if we run in trends, you can see it right here. Thomas Jefferson, president, his Secretary of State, James Madison. Next president, James Madison. His Secretary of State was James Monroe. Next president, James Monroe. His Secretary of State was John Quincy. John Quincy, president, Henry Clay. So in 4 to 8 years, Clay thinks to himself, I could become that next president. All right. And so that's why he made the deal. Now, the country was kind of upset with this, particularly the South and the West. If you look at what John C. Calhoun, who was Quincy Adams' vice president, what he says is he says, I see, in fact, that Mr. Clay has made the president against the voice of his constituents, and that he has been rewarded by the man elevated by him by the first office, his gift, the most dangerous stab, which the liberty of this country has ever received. I will not be on that side. I am with the people. And what he means by that is I am with the common voters. I am with you. And this is interesting to note because this is kind of where politics are going to start heading throughout this time is that they're going to start going after the people. You know, our politicians before this had meant the people, but they really meant just a select individual crowd. What they're meaning now is all white males, regardless of status, regardless of tag. That's who they want to go after, and that's who they wanted to fight for. And so John C. Calhoun says it. I will not be on that side. I'm with the people. And so really what this whole Jacksonian democracy really means at this point in time is one that there is a belief in the common man. Honestly, whether the aristocracy really thinks there is a belief in a common man, we're going to look at that in other points throughout this unit. But this is what it means is that there is a belief in the common man. The common man now, whether no matter how rich or how poor he is, he can rise and elevate himself from where he's at, wherever he wants to be. He can vote, as long as he's a white male, that is, of course, right? And that he can take himself from the bottom to the top, as Drake likes to say it, or however he says it, right? There's that belief in the common man. Also, thanks in part to Western states coming into the Union, there's universal white male suffrage. And so basically, beforehand in the indirect system, the aristocracy system, not all white males got to vote. It was just those that held land or were elite enough to vote, meaning they held a high enough education that they could vote. That's off the books now. You could not even know how to read or write and still can vote. And so that was one of the big things of this new movement of democracy. And then The big thing that really takes place out of this is popular campaigning. We really see the birth of what we know today. Do you think that the current political system that we have right now, with the Democratic convention about to take place, and you got Biden and you got Bernie, and they're going back and forth and they're firing at Trump and everyone's talking smack and throwing it all around. You think that's just been happening in the past 20 years? No, that really starts right here, guys. That starts in this election of 1824 and moves to the election of 1828. Popular campaigning, going out because common men, universal white male suffrage, they're now your voting basin. It's no longer just the rich people that you have to go after. It's the common man, and you've got to sway his vote, and you've got to convince him to vote for me. And so all three of these together represent Jacksonian democracy. In essence, it's just democracy. Now, I always like to think of it, which came first, the chicken or the egg in Jacksonian democracy? Did Jackson bring it about? No, not really. But why does he get the tagline? Because he's the first to really advocate for it. He's the first to start pushing it to the common man. Jackson himself was not born to wealth. He rose himself to wealth through the military and through the Battle of New Orleans. But Jackson was not born rich like John Quincy Adams. I mean, John Quincy's dad was the second president of the United States. He grew up in wealth. He egalitarian. He was sent to France with his dad when during the Revolutionary War, and was taught French, and he learned and he knew the classics. Jackson didn't know a darn thing about the classics. Jackson didn't learn to read until his early adulthood. And so this was one of those things that Jackson represents our transition from what the roots of our Constitution, that all men are created equal. And while we haven't quite gotten there, Jackson's ascendance really comes to that ballot box and comes to the fact that he was popular campaigning, that he was going out, and that he was reaching the common man. So, which came first? Well, of course, democracy came first. And tag name Jacksonian, hence why I put it in the quote boxes right here, is he didn't bring it about. He just opened it up and brought it to what true democracy really looks like. Right. And that leads us to this 1828 campaign where Jackson tries to run for president again against John Quincy. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you anything about John Quincy and what happens during his time as president. But, with him winning the election, right, Jackson's not done. Jackson's going to come back. Jackson's going to challenge him again. And the thing about the 1828 campaign, it's the first time, other than if we remember back to John Adams against Thomas Jefferson, when the papers were going at him and they were calling Adams blind, toothless, old, crippled Adams. The newspapers were calling that, but that wasn't really during an election. That was because they just disliked Adams and disliked what he represented and what he was doing, as with the Alien and Sedition Acts. This campaign, though, was our first true campaign of where we're going to see it was candidate centered, not based upon policy, not based upon what are they going to do, their agenda, their platform, and their planks. That didn't have to do with anything. This was solely about the candidates themselves, their personality, who they were, where they came from. They were going to go after one another. And there was a ton of negative advertising. Like, if you take a look down here, there was tons of candidate promotion, primarily on Jackson's side. They used sectionalism, primarily on Jackson's side. And then, just to be honest, they just got plain dirty with one another. This is Adams, which I'll pull this up, and this is Adams saying, some of the accounts of General Jackson's deeds. And there was rumors, and we don't know if it's truly true or not, that Jackson killed people in duels, and that's considered murder. But they were arguing it out, and he still got away with it. Jackson, though, pitched himself of a man of the people. Jackson campaigned as a man of the people, standing against corrupt bargainers and the rich elite, the aristocracy. He stood that I am a man of the people. I am the common man. I'm just like you. I mean, if you look at this political campaign poster right here in the newspaper, it says Jackson forever, the hero of two wars and of Orleans, the man of the people. He who could not barter nor bargain for the presidency, because it should be derived from the people. Again, very big thing of Jacksonian democracy, the belief in the common man, universal white male suffrage, popular campaigning. We're now trying to get the common man. We're now trying to bring the common man into the foyer here. It's no longer just about the rich and elite, it's about common people. And let's get to them and let's get them. All right. And this is also where he garners the nickname Old Hickory. right? This is the sectionalism. General Jackson really wanted to divide and get the South, so he said, "Huzzah for General Jackson! Down with the Yankees." I mean, John Quincy was from Massachusetts, the New England area, and so they felt that there was some conspiracy to keep that in power. And so, therefore, the aristocracy as well as the poor in the South would support this and General Jackson getting to the presidency. And then, of course, Adams didn't hold back. He distributed what were called coffin handbills and the deeds of General Jackson in killing individual citizens and his brutality and what he did in his daily life. And so this was just a drag 'em out, knock 'em slugfest campaign. There's nothing in it. When you try to do research and look into it, you're not going to find out. Like you're not going to say John Quincy says I'm standing for, giving poor people more rights or expanding voting rights or giving money or lowering taxes or taking away the protective tariff. There was none of that talked about in the 1828 election. It was literally just about one another. There was uh, John Quincy starting a rumor that Jackson was having an affair and that he had multiple affairs with multiple women, and they just went after one another back and forth. But that didn't stop the people in 1828 from voting for Jackson, primarily because Jackson, well, represented and equated and was more like a common man than John Quincy. If you really think about that today, guys, um, that's what politics is all about. We relate to the candidates. We relate to who they are. We like them to be simple. That's why they work so very hard and spend so much money on making them see like they're just like you and I, that they're not elite, that they're not rich, that they don't have prominence in their life, that they're just common people, that they're just like you and me. They enjoy doing the daily things that you and I do. Like I always like to bring up President Obama put a basketball court in the White House. You like to tell people, yeah, I love having people over just to shoot hoops. And to certain people, that's a common everyday thing. They like to talk to you like they're common folks, that they understand what common man is going through. And so Jackson really did that in 1828. And he set the foreground, hence why we give the tagline Jacksonian Democracy, because in 1828, in this election, it really started and laid the groundwork for future elections and how future elections are going to be run and how campaigning is going to be done. Because now, with new states coming in, Missouri, Iowa's about to come in, so is Wisconsin, Michigan, they're going to grant universal white male suffrage. And so no longer do you just have to, convince the rich elite that you are a worthy candidate. You got to convince the common man. A lot of time, the common man don't care about half the policies you set forth. They care about one or two things. And so Jackson did a really good job of that in 1828. And as you see, he takes the election. And look at this. This is, kind of the fitting point to end it. Look at this inauguration portrait right here. You see people, and not it doesn't look like there's just rich people. I mean, it just looks like common people all throughout. Little boys in there, and they're all in the White House, right? And they're all celebrating. You can see there's drinks, right? There's people, drinking here, and they're celebrating, and there's another person drinking, guzzling it right there. But it's just common people in the White House, right? Look at this common man standing on a nice couch. If your mother has ever told you, don't stand on the couch, well, Jackson apparently didn't care in the White House. And so this really shows right here the age of the common man, Jacksonian democracy in action, the common man coming to the White House, the common man enjoying the lusters and the wonders of what the elite should have. And so, therefore, that's where we're going to stop. And we'll pick up tomorrow with the Jacksonian controversies when Jackson is president. But the big things to take away again from today is Jacksonian democracy represents three things. Jacksonian democracy represents the belief in the common man, universal white male suffrage, and the popular campaigning. These are the three key things. And when I'll ask you in questions or what do you know, just kind of checking for your knowledge, Jacksonian democracy, what are the three things? Belief in the common man, universal white male suffrage, and popular campaigning. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll look forward to speaking with you guys tomorrow, and I hope you have a good one. See you.